رسول الله رسول الله.
My name is Sherman Abdul Hakim Jackson. I'm the King Faisal Chair of Islamic Thought and Culture at the University of Southern California. I've been asked to come and talk to you to say a few words about the issue of the Prophet and his marriage, or his marriages, in fact. In point of fact, more specifically about the question of the Prophet and the fact that he was married to more than one woman at a time, what is called popularly polygamy, but what technically is actually polygyny. And the reason that I've been asked to talk about this is that it's been pointed out that oftentimes when Muslims speak about the question of the Prophet as husband, the Prophet in his marriage, the Prophet as family man, the issue of polygyny is sort of swept under the rug as a topic to be avoided. And I think it is important that the topic itself not be avoided, but that it be brought out front and center, and that it be spoken about in a way that empowers both Muslims and non-Muslims to understand it as it actually is, so that Muslims do not fall prey to some of the ideological extremism on one side, and non-Muslims do not fall prey to some of the ideological extremism on the other side, but rather that we come to understand polygyny as practiced by the Prophet as it actually was. And the first thing that we want to understand in this context is a very important lesson, and that is that polygyny as practiced by the Prophet and as upheld in Islam is a 100% thoroughly, absolutely volunteer arrangement. Muslim women exercise and enjoy and have a right to agency in determining who they marry. Polygyny is no exception to that basic rule. Even the Prophet Muhammad himself did not use the fact that he was the Prophet, he was the messenger of God, he was a man who was recognized in his community as having that authority and that relationship with God. And despite that fact, he himself did not seek to use that authority as a means of imposing polygyny on any woman who did not want to be a part of that arrangement. In fact, we know explicitly that there were tribes or clans in Arabia whose women were not very easily ingratiated with the institution of polygyny, and the Prophet himself explicitly avoided any overtures of polygyny to those tribes or to the women of those tribes. Again, refusing to use his authority as prophet to try to impose polygyny on anyone. So again, polygyny, the first thing we need to understand is that it is an all volunteer arrangement. Now this raises some question about the relevance of polygyny in modern times. And this, of course, is a huge topic, but I think we may make some headway in beginning to understand it if we begin with the following point of departure. I am an American. I am comfortable in my American culture. And I recognize that America is not one culture, but many cultures. However, we may define those cultures as American cultures. And the fact that I am comfortable in my American culture, and my particular American culture, does not disabuse me of the recognition that my culture is not universally valid. That there are other peoples in America who have an American culture that somewhat differs from my own, or may differ from my own. There are people in other parts of the world, in other times, in other places, for whom an American culture may not be the chosen way in which they go about regulating the affairs of their lives. And so we must be careful that we don't hold up one particular culture as being universally valid and as being a justification for passing judgments on all others. And I say this to say the following. Islam does not obligate anyone to engage in polygyny. Rather, it holds out polygyny as a means for those cultures, those individuals in particular times and particular places, under particular circumstances, who may see in polygyny a means of averting some of the more harmful effects that occur when sexual relationships are not regulated through marriage. And in particular, some of the harmful effects that may fall upon children and women are some of the harmful effects that polygyny, assuming that the men involved have the means and the temperament to engage in it responsibly. Because again, we have to understand that Islam doesn't obligate this institution, but it allows it for the purpose of enhancing the health of society, not bringing problems into society. And for those individuals, those peoples, those cultures, in those times, those places, under those circumstances, that recognize polygyny as a means of regulating sexual relationships through the medium of marriage, where all of the individuals involved can be protected, and any individuals that might issue from those unions can be protected, can have the safety net, the emotional advantage of a full-fledged family with a mother and a father and natural attachments to both. Islam holds out polygyny as a possible means of regulating those affairs. And so, to summarize, we must note again that Islam does not impose polygyny on anyone. Number two, polygyny is an all volunteer arrangement. No one is forced to enter into a polygynous relationship. And then third, we must recognize that there are circumstances, times, places, cultures, peoples that will recognize polygyny as a preferred means of managing sexual relationships by conferring upon them the advantage of family, as opposed to some of the other ways in which these relationships are sometimes managed that tend to lead to certain kinds of problems that we as a society would hope that we would be able to avoid. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.